Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is John Spencer, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
I'm not the world's greatest veteran. I'll just be honest. Like, I'm not a rah-rah guy. And you know us Army guys, not like the Marines, we fly our flag. There are guys in the Army that do not like the Marines, where they're like, I was in the 2-4, and they're just insane about it. I am, and I've never been that. I'm proud of the 165th that I was in. Proud that I was at Machuca, and I taught years how to do close operations. But I'll be damned if I don't love what guys like us do is we try to explain, like, here is modern conflict. And for a lot of guys who want tanks to roll across field in Ukraine and the Fulda Gap, they're getting a lot of what they wanted for years. But I think where you and I are talking, and we don't always even agree, but I think we have space for each other in our conversations. I dig that we get to do this. I dig that we get to establish, like, if you don't take interpreter operations seriously and you don't treat it like firing an M4 for effect at 400 yards at man-sized target, then you do not get to play accurately in this game. And then you would say the same things about modern urban conflicts. I dig that we get to do this.
Yeah, no, I have a dream job, and I think you do as well. It's really self-actualization. I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else at this point. And all roads led me here. I mean, I'm a real big believer in all things happen for a reason. You know, I'm in the limelight right now based on my decades of research in urban warfare. And I'm trying to do good with that.
Yeah. You've got a new book coming out. And I also want to say, just so that everybody understands, I'm talking to John, as my friend John, who has some military experience. He's not speaking for any of his organizations that he works with or anything. We're just talking. And we're going to talk a little bit about Ukraine because we have to, because guys like that have to try to explain this thing. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of my colonel buddies talking about sustainment and supply and the fact that, and I was saying the other day to one of my friends, Dan, on the show, there is a general officer in the Russian army who's in charge of all of the liquid, like slippery stuff, lubes and greases and all that crap. And that guy's like terrified because he's not using enough of what they expected of this lubricant. They can't get enough of this one. And just the ability to keep vehicles maintained when they're pushed forward in the field, that is an enormous task that they appear to not be doing very well.
No, I couldn't say any better. I mean, absolutely. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, and this is not a professional military.
And yet they're doing it in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. I mean, I jumped into northern Iraq in OF1, which is a part of the first part of the book, and we didn't have lubricant we needed for our Mark 19s. Armies make mistakes, but what the backbone, and I'm actually a believer in this, is small unit leaders, and the power of our military isn't our technology or anything like that. It's our small unit leaders down to the individual soldier that's going to figure a way. And that's what they're asked. That's not what you get when half your army is conscripts being forced. And you might have heard me say this, but I've been saying it a lot lately because unfortunately this war is allowing me to highlight that soldiers don't fight for dictators. They don't fight for, the big chief. They fight for each other. They fight for family, and they fight for a cause. You can order that, and it does mean different things to each individual. If they don't have all those things, then they don't fight.
One of the things about conscripts is the alarm, right? That thing is missing. They fight to protect themselves from the person behind them, and then the person who's fighting for Ukraine will trade their life for the person in front of them. And it's a different fight. And the Russians are going to have some level of success. We've got to deal with that. And we've passed the point where there's an easy out. The Russians are going to be like, you know what, never mind. They're invested. This is going to be a long thing. And just like the Sinai, we battled over the Sinai as a world for, still, I'm sure somebody else wants it back. It's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar problem to solve this thing. And the world is going to have to figure out how to bear it. And look, Sherman, every time we do these things, Sherman sits up in his graves like, what have I taught you guys? Right? Every time.
Yeah, absolutely. War is hell.
Yeah. And the only way to get through it is to make it so awful that nobody ever wants to do it again, and to make it end as quickly as possible. And that is a means to try to be more sophisticated. But is it even possible to be more sophisticated, do you think?
I think there is. I mean, that's the reason for the law, really the rules-based conflict that we established after World War II. We, the world, and everybody signed it, and everybody's beholden to it. Now, I've highlighted how urban warfare exposes that all the way down to the individual soldier level, right? The flip of the switch that you and I have talked about in the past. It is not easy to follow rules in war, and it takes an immense amount of investment in individual soldiers up to generals to when the crap hits the fan and you're under the stress that you follow the rules. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we call it ethics, we call it values, but it's what militaries do. And like we talked about, when you don't have all those other things, then your rules-based system starts to fall apart. But luckily, we have a system in place that, if like in this situation, I mean, only the dead have seen the end of war. I consider myself a warrior. I've always been one, but I don't want war. I want to be prepared for it. So when it comes, it can end quickly with the least amount of civilian deaths, and that's why we put our warriors in front.
Yeah, the one thing you just said, and I want to make sure we stop and pause on this, because again, I've got a lot of friends who are very, 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 very educated and smart and experienced in this field. I consider you one of them. But all of us want peace. How do we get to peace? How do we find an off-ramp? Maybe we can't build an off-ramp today, but what will that off-ramp be? If that off-ramp, again, is $1 trillion in palletized hundreds that we give to Putin to say, go live in the Emirates and just never leave, then let's do that over whatever else is coming, because we do want peace. Even though we're warriors, even though we're prepared to do the worst, we would rather do anything but that. And it's I think that is not a common perception outside of the warrior scholar world. It's like, well, we want this fight. And there are certainly guys who do, and rightfully so, because that's what they do. But I think on the warrior scholar side, we're looking for other ways to try to do this. How do we prevent this from happening again? This is needless. There is, whatever it is. I mean, we had the Minsk report. We could be doing something else politically through words instead of through these lethal actions.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I couldn't say any better. There are 4 forms of national power. I mean, the one of the reasons we're a superpower is not because of our military. I mean, of course, it is because of our military, but the U.S. is a superpower because of our economic power, our information power, how we're viewed around the world, and all the aspects of the forms of national power. And honestly, if we talk about Russia, that's why I think no matter what happens, he comes out a loser. They come out a loser. Not necessarily what happens in Ukraine, even though I personally think he's going to lose. And by the time, I could be wrong. There's no certainty in war. You and I both know that. There's no certainties on where this goes. And, so many things can happen. But no matter what, I say he comes out a loser. One, he comes out a loser because he showed the world his cards. He showed his hands. He doesn't have a good poker hand. His military, it came up wanting. It was measured. It came up wanting. It couldn't pull off a Desert Storm. It couldn't pull off an OIF-1. It couldn't do any of it. So he comes out no matter what, a loser. He has now come out of this category that we have, peer, near peer. He officially drops out of the peer competition into near peer. We could mop the floor with this guy. Again.
This is so true. When you look at what Putin is sitting on top of, the oligarchs clearly aren't happy. And I'm saying oligarchs, look, the billionaires, the people that need to make money through Russia's economy, they're not happy. Every day someone dies in Russia because of this conflict. There's someone that could sacrifice themselves. I was telling my buddy, I'm like, look, if you put 2,000 committed Russians unarmed, and they go toward, we'll just say the Kremlin, wherever Putin is sitting that day, you can people to topple this government. So he knows that. And now also, like you said, his maneuver capability, well, one, it's being decimated by the day, and tanks and BMPs. These things are expensive and hard to produce well, and to get good tires, all of these things. His ass is out there. And Russia is an enormous country where someone can be like, we're just going to take this because you're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah. I mean, it comes out of in every way I can think of. I really don't see any. I mean, I see a couple of ways he could save face and maintain his power, save face of what he did. There's no way I see him coming out winning in any aspect. And I think there's going to be a lot of changes, I think, in this strengthened NATO, this strengthened really gave us a peek into what our peer. We honestly thought there were some advanced long-range precision artillery. I mean, we had all these things that we thought about, and it's blowing my mind every day what they're not doing and what they're shown incapable of doing. I don't have to tell you, but just walk down this large list of things that, oh my God, he can't even achieve air dominance. He can't. He's not doing electronic warfare. He's not. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I feel bad for his soldiers, to be honest. I mean, they're running around a country that's huge, second largest country in Europe. I mean, it's just insane. I honestly, I don't want to, I'm not an evil person, just kill every Russian on the planet. That's not, we fight enemies and clothe and destroy enemies. I feel bad for these soldiers. They're poorly led, poorly trained, poorly equipped. It's awful. I mean, like you said, we don't want war.
And the modern form of war, and I know you are, as good as anybody in the world at understanding, at least in your lane, which is a significant lane, the aspects of modern war. But and I've been talking about this. You can buy off-the-shelf with basic, now we'll say with an advanced level of capacity, which is in practice, and some off-the-shelf software and optics. You can reliably touch a target with a hunting rifle 2 miles out, and reliably enough to stop a column or to engage something, right? And that means any civilian farmer who can get a good spot can waylay you can have all the tanks you want, but if you can't get fuel to them, if you can't get, look, we lost our minds in 2000, I think it was 11 or 12 in Afghanistan when there was a problem with contracts and we couldn't get troops into country, right? People, you still chew by the bots, and we couldn't get chips. These are things that are like so, but it messed people up. People complained about it. Now, make that fuel, oil, food, boots.
Yeah. I ran out. I tell people all the time, we ran out of water in 2003. It was August in Iraq, and they couldn't get containers because the army. The enemy exposes your weaknesses, and sometimes we learn the wrong lessons from our successes because the enemy didn't expose our weakness. I mean, to be frank, in OAF1, Baghdad was not secure. It was not defended. It taught us the wrong lessons about what we could do in urban warfare. The battle that's about to happen in Kiev isn't the battle of Baghdad. It isn't the battle of Fallujah. It's the battle of Berlin. It's the battle of Stalingrad. I keep telling people, like, at this point, you're using the wrong reference. The enemy will expose your weaknesses. And in 2003, we exposed our logistical weaknesses on projecting water from all the way from the Kuwait port and connexes all the way up to the troops north in Iraq. And my soldiers were one bottle of water a day in 100-degree weather. And
I have an example. I've been using this. It's a modern infantry battalion, forward projected in a I'll say a non-active shooting part of the time in Iraq, right? We couldn't get boots reliably to our dudes. And there were American soldiers with their feet poking out of the side of their boots. Now look, they could order their own on Amazon and probably get them, but that's not the answer. The answer is, can the Army provide? And this is the American Army that can get anything. And you're right. This is not in the beginning of the war either. And you're not surprised to hear that. It's hard to do these things. And so I want you to talk about that, but then at some point, Ukraine is going to be, or somebody is going to be prodding and poking and looking for internal weakness on the St. Petersburg side, Moscow. They're going to look to do things because there's a lot of attention focused in Ukraine. It doesn't take many people willing to go on a suicide mission to go out and cause significant problems for Russia internally on their own side by hitting a refinery, whatever it's going to be. It can even be if you can sow panic. They have 20 dudes go insert into Russia and sow panic. That's expensive for anybody at the top to deal with.
Yeah, so I'm on that, and like I studied Mumbai, where 10 terrorists were sent into another country and caused havoc, that brought a city to its knees for 3 days. I personally don't think that Ukraine would do that. Just the thought of it would play into also the narrative of Russia protecting Russian people and escalation. To be frank, I think all it needs to do is continue to defeat Russian military in detail. I mean, but this reality, I think, and this again exposes themes in my book. The Russian families are protesting enough to cause Putin real problem. Russian mothers have caused Putin a lot of problems in history. During the submarine downing in the 2000s, they caused him to have to respond. They marched on Grozny and camped out for a month until the Russian generals came out and talked to them. I mean, Russian mothers you don't mess with them. And they're right now, they're not happy. Their sons are coming home into body bags, and that's what puts pressure. And that's why I keep saying Russia's running out of time for many reasons, militarily and really in this country, because soldiers talk to their families, and their families now have a window into combat that they've never had. I mean, I can pump in right now live feed Kiev. I can pump in a lot of live feeds in Kiev. And the bombings that we see, we're not seeing battles. We're seeing individual ambushes, individual engagements streamed live or uploaded immediately. That's a change, and I think it's a change in the fabric of this ideal that soldiers go off to war and we just don't talk to them until they come back. That's gone.
That's gone. Yeah. And also live reporting from within the ranks. It's like, I've got a GoPro, I'm going to stream it, and if I'm going to die, you're going to see what it was like. And, so forget about, Ernie Pyle, and that, like you're talking actual, like Tremel Sledge, but live, not just in a book 50, 60 years later.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because, my writing mentor is Max Brooks. And when I read his book, World War Z, there's a Battle of Yonkers is in there. I found it incredible, one, that a civilian could explain some of the military intricacies that much detail, but there are a fully networked military against a horde of zombies, and why it'd be really bad if I could see what my buddy was seeing, if he's being axed to death or eaten alive, and I'm watching that live stream. But that's where we're at, right? We're at Russian soldiers can see Russian soldiers dying.
In the American Army, I've got a friend who was a commander, and they had a vehicle approaching a camp. And I'm being vague on purpose, so I'm not trying to expose you. They had a vehicle approaching a camp where the soldiers like, hey, probably this vehicle's coming. And he's like, well, shoot out the front headlight. You're an infantry soldier. And he's like, oh, no, sir, I can't do that. And he's like, I'm ordering you, shoot that headlight out right now. Stop that vehicle. You think it's a threat? Stop it. No. And then it stayed that they didn't obey that lawful order. This is the era that we're in.
No, I think and this is why I really wanted to write up this book that I wrote about these connected soldiers. I wanted to start with, I went from being a soldier to a scholar, and they don't have to be separate, but I went to basically analyzing what we say is true, or there are myths about our army and about the myths of what works and what doesn't when it hits combat, right? So killing is not natural, to be honest. And I could see that. No, I'm not going to shoot. Like, what are you talking about? That situation isn't a natural situation to pull the trigger. There are many things that have to be in place for soldiers to be able to kill. And we've learned those across history. And like in the book, I start with that, and it may get some flack because I academically go through the history of research on why soldiers fight and how can they fight? How can they get past the fear of combat or get past the act of killing? It's been researched. It's known why soldiers fight, and it has to do with their buddies to the left or right. Like, that's been proven in many armies and many wars across time, as academically kind of accurate as you can get. But then we kind of expect that it just happens, right? That just happens. The band of brothers, what I call the band of brothers effect, just happens in soldiers. It does not. And I kind of walk through my own experiences to show that it gets built through a couple ways. But if you don't have that, then like I would suspect, like we see in a conscript army with a mixture, right? The Russian army isn't all a conscript army. There's Israel, the Azerbaijani, they're not all conscript armies. They have mandatory service or things like that in them. But cohesion, we know, is the lifeblood of a fighting military, the lifeblood of a small unit. And it really is the lifeblood of that soldier pulling the trigger, right? Because cohesion established group norms, what's acceptable and what's not. In the old days, it might have been, cowardice might have been the fact that you didn't eat that night. If you showed cowardice on the battle and during Wellington's campaign, you didn't get to eat that night. So these cohesion established group norms within like what's okay in our squad. So you not following that order, if it was legitimate order, is not okay, let alone the UCMJ and all that stuff.
It's my work, because I work with the military as either a DoD civilian or contract person. This is the latter portion of my career. I had the ability to stay in an area, get really, really good at that area, get really, really good at my job of collecting information. And you also got to see units, how they worked, and what worked and what didn't, and how unprepared every single unit was. But I think of right now, and he's 7 in his true battalion. He really cared for his troops. And you always hear that, right? You always hear NCOs saying, I am the backbone, I am the leader. But when I would watch these E7 go up to each one of his troops before patrol, every single time, yes, we did the pre-mission brief, but it was never just performed. It was done, right? And then he would put his hands on, as if they were going to jump, put his hands on their gear and say, right here, right there. And you could tell he loved these guys.
Yeah.
And they loved him. Their commander, great dude, solid commander, but he wasn't the best commander of the battalion. And so you have these things where the connectedness, when you're talking about this, it's impacted by, you have to use this good E7, and maybe that E7 is just good at this one thing. But from what I saw, sending guys out the wire every day, he was very caring. He was ensuring he was setting an example, and the commander was a little less engaged. Smart guy, everything else, but one of these guys was an absolute pro. The other guy was a 20-something-year-old with not enough experience and was trying to figure out how to run a company. That caused some separation in that unit as to how these guys saw things, how they performed, and where their confidence was. And they didn't, I'll just say, I can't say this emphatically. I don't believe they had trust in their command to have their back, but they had trust in that NCO to have their front, to make sure they were going to be out and prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, that's a part of the front matter of my book is, I was in the military for 25 plus years. I didn't understand all of these things working together. Like you get told for your entire career, like leadership is important, caring for your troops are important. There's creeds and there's all these things. It wasn't until I really discovered a single picture in a book. A really famous historian actually broke down the strength of Wellington's troops during the Peninsular Campaign. And he laid out in a kind of a wire diagram combat effectiveness. And right in front of my eyes was like everything I'd ever done in the military, everything from the NCO support channel, the tactical SOPs, these systems of systems that are required to have a really good unit. Like, and you walked into that unit and you felt that guy was a key part of that unit.
Yeah.
And I talk about, as an officer, it's really weird because officers get moved around. I went from being an enlisted person. So I went from private to sergeant first class, and then I switched to be an officer. The role of the officer is very different no matter what people say the role of the officers. It's a fact. The role of the officer is different. So when I would come into both my new unit when I was a platoon leader and a company commander, you could feel when things weren't right. You could something might be little, like the way they communicate with their NCOs, the way they talk to each other, the discipline, but it could be, like you said, it could be their interpersonal reactions versus transactional kind of stuff. The military is actually a very complex system of systems where they carry stuff forward, and sometimes they don't even know why, because we're a rotational element. Like we rotate people constantly. We're bigger than Walmart, really. I mean, 68,000 people coming in and going out a year. It's incredible. But we do things sometimes that we don't know why we're doing them. We think that they're good. And then sometimes we stop doing things that are critical. And I kind of point some of those out in the book, like putting people in barracks together. That's been a historic way to build friendship and cohesion and likeness between soldiers. For some reason, as society changed, so does the military. We started throwing people together in hotel rooms, basically a barracks, to where they each have their own room within a 2-man room, and they share a kitchen. You know what that doesn't build? Small unit cohesion.
Yeah. And I just want to go back to like the unit dynamics. A commander, like a battalion commander, only has so much flexibility even within that. Like maybe that was the only guy who could run that company at that time. And I'm not saying he was bad. Give him 3 weeks, maybe he figures it out too, because he was a solid dude, very, very smart. It was just when I got there and I watched that unit, I saw a unit struggling to understand what their mission was, because there wasn't a lot of shooting, but it was dangerous. They could be shot at, but do you want to be the guy that shoots somebody? And then, look, I have been in the room when the brigade commander gets presented something, a young soldier shoots an Iraqi guy, and that kid's life is in the balance, and the commander's thinking about this, right? And a kid at a company level he can't even comprehend what the brigade commander is or who he. The moment that guy shows up, he loses his mind, and he hasn't even done anything wrong. Like, he's just standing there, right? And so here's this brigade commander thinking, am I going to put this kid through, a criminal process for killing an Iraqi guy? And he has no control over his future. So you look at every human interaction on the way up to that, and does a kid have trust enough to do that, to go, I've got the rules of engagement. It's up to me. I can elevate to lethal action in an instant if I feel it's necessary. But, can I do that? Now you put that in a conscript military where, and I want to ask you, gosh, I want to ask so many things. when you look at the Ukrainian past, right? It's a Soviet past, and you and I have worked abroad, and we've seen that Soviet model where if the top guy doesn't tell you to do it, you don't trust the system to get it right. But that's really not a whole lot different than our system. If you're an E4 and there's a guy driving towards you and you've waved at him and he doesn't stop, you don't want to be the guy who doesn't shoot that guy because then he blows himself. It's so hard. All of these things come into play to create chaos. And as a commander, you can't think of all the scenarios. One of my favorite things to ask anybody, but especially commanders, what keeps you up at night? And it's never that 18-year-old in a turret. It's never that. It's always something else. But ask that 18-year-old, he's got a different answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so not saying I'm this, I made a lot of mistakes, and my book is a memoir, hoping that I expose the mistakes, because no position, like we're talking about, no position is easy. There's no easy, although being a private was pretty easy because I just did what I was told, and they don't expect much of you at that level. I was the best private. I love that. But I walked through in this book the stresses under me as a platoon leader, and especially as a company commander, where I almost broke mentally as a company commander just based on the amount of issues that I was facing. And that time in the war, 2008, it was rough. What we were asking small unit leaders to build, to be the mayor, to be the sheriff, to be all the essential services. Anything goes boom in your AO, it's your fault. We ask a lot of our soldiers, and that's why it's what we do. And sometimes soldiers don't understand, like, everything has a purpose. Every mundane thing that we ask them to do eventually will, if in the heat of battle, in a war, in a deployment, may not ever make sense to them, but there's a reason usually to it. And it wasn't until years later, now that I've had time to go back and reflect on all this stuff, that I start to see it. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying about that kid. I personally think we as an officers are always doing OJT. Like, unless you're in the Ranger Regiment, you're not doing anything the second time. Yeah. So with all the people all the commanders you interacted with, that dude, no matter how much of a front he puts on, he's making shit up. It's his first time doing it, and it's a crazy model, and I know why we do it. The other people have different models of you sit in a second command for a while, or there's an assistant platoon leader, there's an assistant company commander. You don't do it until you're more senior, like you're a major before you're a company commander. There are other ways to do it. Our system is strong, of course, but man, does it put a lot of stress on the individual leaders.
We've had Trent Gibson on the show a couple of times. He was Corporal Dunham's commander. Corporal Dunham jumped on a grenade for his fellow Marines in Iraq a long time ago now. But there's also that. Trent owns that death. You don't get to get rid of it. Every time, that whole entire company, like, they belong to him, especially with this cataclysmic event that happens. It's career defining, and it's not Trent's fault that this happened. It's what they had to do, but you do have these responsibilities. And then he goes on to be a major, a lieutenant colonel. I'm not sure if he's retired now, but this happened almost 20 years ago now. And these guys, they're living and dying to this day based upon that day, that deployment. I mean, people don't get that load I've not been in command of that unit for 18 years, right? And yet these are still your guys because of that connectedness.
Absolutely. And I feel that it's one of the things that's almost impossible to prepare for. And I talk about, I could see, to be honest, to be frank, and you, I could see any dead body, enemy dead body. It didn't bother me a bit. I didn't lose sleep about that at all. I could pick up body parts, and we did. And one time somebody hands me a bloody dog tags of one of our own soldiers and says, "What do you have me do with this, sir?" And that just seared in my mind and is part of my nightmares. It's really hard. There's almost, I don't know what, we know things, and I have good friends that are in this business. I think that the ability to communicate back home impacts that ability to live with the horrors of combat, because there is an aspect of knowing what to do in order to prepare soldiers to fight, how they do it. But now that how you live with the fight is a whole different topic. And I know you touched on it many times in your show. How do you get soldiers to live with some of the horrors? I think strongly that the thing that helps them fight, the cohesion, is also what helps them live with the fight, right? Some of these moments are life defining, and then they bond you for life. And only people that can understand it are the people that were there, who can truly understand it, were the people that were there with you. So one of the stories that drove my book was the story of a patrol that gets hit by a grenade. The grenade misses the patrol and kills an Iraqi kid. And they have to see the aftermath of that.
Right.
And they go back to the patrol base, the JSS, and then they immediately get on the internet and start talking to their wives. That's a break in what we know allows soldiers to deal with the horrors of combat, is coming back and sitting around the campfire and talking to each other about it. Now I can, and I did this. My wife in the book, she goes off to war, and I'm someone with 3 kids, and we're FaceTiming her every day while she's deployed.
Yeah.
That's the point of the book. That's the theme of the book, is that connection that we're talking about on a daily, nightly basis is impacting the military. And I don't know if the military is aware of it.
The shared living, hard experiences, the shared combat experiences. These are chapters in your book. Everybody should definitely go check it out. It's up for pre-sales right now. Go to Amazon. There's the link. If not, look, just type in Connected Soldiers and John Spencer, and it's going to come right up. It'd be great if you guys use that link. If you want to support my show, breakitdownshow.com, hit the PayPal link. And if you just build your own subscription, you want me to come by your house and have dinner? Great. I'll come do that. Whatever it is, just put $5 or $10 a month in there. And that helps me to create these things and build these stories and tell these tales and give the reality of what's going on. I want to tie us back to Ukraine, because Russia is investing a lot of effort into this to whatever end. Who cares about that? But what we know is that, look, I'm a Department of Army civilian. If I get hurt in combat, which every single person who leaves the camp has got a chance of getting hurt every single day, there's not a VA for those people. How about if you're a Leo contractor every day on patrol with, by the way, law enforcement officer? If you're a cop in Phoenix who takes a contract gig and you're patrolling every day with the Afghan National Police, with the Iraqi National Police, with African Company X National Police, and you break your ankle, we have to take care of these people. And so Russia is literally chewing up its men. And Russia has 140 million-ish people in it. And big portion of their society is now tied into this fight. And if they're losing, I mean, the numbers are horrific. If it's 1,000 people a day, if it's more, I mean, we're talking Vietnam in a month, and we're still dealing with Vietnam, still paying for that in the cost of human lives, suicides, Agent Orange, all of these things. I don't know what to say about all that stuff, but it's just a massive, this is part of that multi-trillion-dollar problem, right? Like, Russia's going to be in a bad way for a long time, even if they win.
Yeah. And yeah, the cost of war. I don't know how to explain it more. I've done a little bit of research on it. And actually, I don't know if you know, but the last living veterans supported spouse of a Civil War descendant died recently.
Yeah.
And we were still paying out, we as in the U.S. government, paying out pension to a Civil War basically relative that would get a pension. So the cost of war, most people don't understand, is more than just on the soldiers. I mean, it's a society, because we have to take care of these people. You're right. I mean, it's the less than 1% that for us, with those numbers that you're just talking about, same thing for Russia, but they don't have a system like us. So we make huge efforts, and it's very important to us. But I don't, even then, even though how much the United States, we take care of soldiers, I don't know if we really understand. And that's the point with all veterans, I think, to write their stories. Yeah. There's a cost to the individual. There's a cost to their families for sure. But there's actually a very large cost to society. And my friend, Max Brooks thinks there should be a war tax in all of our taxes to make that clear. When we send troops somewhere, that there's going to be a big cost. I mean, I mean, I think you're right in Russia that they're, I mean, like I said, that's why I think no matter what, they come out losers. Anything, just the, recruitment and everything, even though, like I said, all the Russian military aren't conscripts. It's not all conscripts, right? It wouldn't work if it was all conscripts. They have a portion that's contracted, right? They have a professional force. It wouldn't work. But like imagine anybody in the Russian society that voluntarily joining after they've seen what's happened to this army in the Ukraine, the way it's been treated, and it's going to get pushed. I honestly think they're going to get pushed to keep going. And he, Stalin actually said that quantity was his own quality, because it was just about sending men off to die in mass numbers.
And we're not getting a real accurate hack on what the numbers are, but they're not insignificant. And if you're losing a battalion a week, that's not sustainable. Not in the modern society. It's Elon Musk, a billionaire, just chimed in and said, here's the internet. You can't control that anymore. And again, off the shelf software, optics, rifle, 308 rounds. Look out. There's a guy, I said this the other day, you could take bags of dirt and put them on the side of the road and stop a Russian column because they don't know what's in those bags of dirt. Could be a bomb.
I mean, there's plenty of history where the civilians have gotten on their rooftops and thrown stones on top of Russian or Roman soldiers and defeated armies. Right. Because this act, to be honest, and it's what I'm telling people, what the Ukrainian people are doing is really weird in history. I mean, that amount of the population taking up arms and actively resisting is not normal. Had we faced that in Afghanistan or in Iraq, because you're maybe like a 10% insurgency, we would have been. It would have been really bad for us. I mean, I can't. I did the invasion. It would have been. They would have chewed us up and spit us out. Really, if every one of those, Iraqi people grabbed their AK-47s that they all have in their house and came out and started fighting. That this is not normal what the Ukrainian did, and God save them for what they're doing.
Yeah. And they also won't be in great shape after this. No. I mean, even if they win, there's such a high cost. They are going to lose people. They're throwing people in bags into ditches right now.
Yeah, I saw that.
You can't bury everybody, right?
So I think that, and I agree. So I don't know if you heard of the call now to form a Marshall Plan to rebuild Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine, Zelensky's going to go down in history basically as a Churchill of Washington. The Ukrainian people, even if they lose, we'll see the biggest urban insurgency in modern history, if not history. When they win, we as a world will, I think, immediately start rebuilding them. And I think that they can do it. I don't know if you know, Pete, after the nuclear bombs got dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the power and the water were back on in a week.
Wow. Really? Wow.
Because the Japanese people, society and community is so important to them. War is a battle of wills. The Ukrainian people will rise back up after this and rebuild better. They're going to pay a huge cost. They're willing to pay the ultimate cost, but I think we as the world, I'll start sending my money, take my money to help them rebuild it, because they fought Russia for us. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have a good history of picking our champions, right? And let's be honest about Ukraine. A year ago, they weren't the most beautiful. Look, it's a beautiful country, beautiful people. We're not talking about that. But their behavior is not, I mean, look, they're not in certain clubs for a reason, right?
Yeah, but you rise to the occasion, right? All of our heroes, they're not heroes because of what they were before. They rose to the occasion and they became heroes. You don't know the mettle of a man or a mettle of the people or a country until you put it to the ultimate test.
No, I agree with you, and they have definitely shown up, and that's laudable. I do worry though about and I'll just call it a corruption problem. I worry about their corruptibility and what they were politically, and their inability to toe the line with what Europe thought was normal, right? And so they haven't been invited in part because now they're going to get invited in because they're getting picked on. But that's not look, they got a lot of thugs there, right? And right now it's okay because they're fighting for their lives. But when they're in the EU, when they're in NATO, when they're part of the club and they act that way, are we going to have this problem again? Or are we going to have a Versailles Treaty response from Russia where everybody, look, people are getting fired from their jobs. I was joking the other day about not calling a Moscow Mule because, or I'm not going to eat Russian dressing anymore on my salad. But people are actually taking this hard of a line, and we're at some point going to have to accept that there is going to have to be an off-ramp. We are going to have to dust off the Russian people and figure out how to get them stable, because we need them to be stable, not unstable.
No, I agree with all that. And I will say what comes out of this won't be the old Ukraine. It'll be a new country. And to be honest, we had our own struggles as a country back in the beginning. If you want to go that far back, I think they come out of this very different.
Okay.
Personally, I'm not an expert in the region for sure.
Yeah. Have we, and you don't have to have an answer for this, but I wonder myself, have we passed the point where Putin is allowed to run Russia? Now, let's just assume he physically survives this conflict, because he is a guy that's ordered people to be irradiated with, radiation and done that in foreign countries, right? So it's a big bill to pay here for this man. But have we passed that point where he'd be allowed to sit there on top once we get this thing all sorted out?
Again, I'm not a Russian expert. I think he will do something. He's not a crazy, irrational actor, in my opinion. He will do something to save face. He's going to take something. It won't be Kyiv, in my opinion. He's going to take something that he wants, and to be able to keep power and say he did something and save face, whether that's take the whole Donbass region, to take the warm water ports near Odessa. He's going to take, I predict, and Zelensky's got to make, and the Ukrainians will have to make a hard decision on, like you said, there's got to be an off-ramp. There has to be all war is politics. The only definition of victory is getting the other person to come to the political table. There's going to be a negotiation. And unfortunately, I don't think this is Russia just go home. Like you said, they're going to take something, and they're going to get something in order to leave. I mean, they're not stopping anytime soon. I think hopefully, as an urban warfare guy, I predicted correctly. Now they're going to run into the Battle of Stalingrad. This isn't going to be even Grozny for them. They've given and key residents long enough to prepare. And the fact that, by the way, there's a city underneath that city of underground that will survive. Let's be frank, survive a Moab. I'm not going to go to nuclear war. It'd survive a complete flattening and still have the ability to resist.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem for them to deal with that. You're right, and that urban part of it, I do want to get into that with you because that is squarely your wheelhouse, and what we have now in terms of capability. And the other day we were talking just like off the shelf drones don't have to even be an actual weapon, but if you're a commander and there's drones flying at you, you're terrified. You got to deal with it. Now you got guys with shotguns chasing drones and not even weaponized because you don't know. So there are so many problems. It gets so splintered in terms of what you have to do if they end up in Kyiv. What do you like? I don't know. Give us an idea of how complex that's going to be for a Russian commander trying to take a city.
Yeah, not every city is the same, right? So I think he could take Mariupol, some of the smaller cities now if he wanted to, even though they're strongly resisting, and that's really cool. But their civilians are paying a really high price, as you know. Ideally, you'd want to empty the cities of people. And I'll have a Wall Street Journal op-ed out next week about, I think he's doing the humanitarian crisis on a purpose. Mm-hmm. But as a commander, you want everybody out, because one of the reasons that urban warfare is so hard is that, again, we follow rules and there is a restriction on the use of force, even that Russia has to follow. That he is, whether he's committing war crimes, which will be strongly investigated, which is really cool that the ICC is moving faster than it ever has in history to investigate war crimes. He wants to the battle, and he could hold it for a little while. He doesn't have the time to siege it. And my research and my field of studies, a lot of people talk about the return of siege warfare. I don't actually profess that. Sure, it happens, and it has happened in modern history. I usually think, though, that you siege or surround a city in preparation to do something. To me, the letter of law of the siege is you surround it, and that's the goal, is to starve it out. Things like that. I think they're going to isolate it. I think and what I keep saying is, in all the things he's moving into position is to penetrate it. Now the problem is he gave them a lot of time to prepare for that. Doesn't mean that he can't still do it. And I don't want to give him tips. There's a couple systems that I would be looking for, because he doesn't have to clear. This is not a clear Kyiv operation. There's one goal, and that's to get Zelensky out and put a new government on. If he just gets to the center and forces Zelensky to flee, forces Zelensky to give up, or kills Zelensky in his basically inner circle and raises the Russian flag, he wins. He didn't have to clear all of the 3 million person city. It's not. It literally isn't. He doesn't have to pry out all the fighters, right? It's not Mosul. He has to penetrate the inside. So the good defense will pick that apart to where it makes it hard to penetrate into urban terrain, because urban terrain is not an infantryman fight. Although us infantry guys, we like to train enter and clear rooms. Urban warfare. This is a different context of urban warfare. This is not clearing houses. This is clearing streets to push through to get to somewhere. You don't do that without tanks. You don't do it without mechanized infantry. You don't do it with a hell of a lot of artillery. And honestly, like we started off the show, I don't even know if he has the logistical support to bring the artillery he needs. Right. So he fired like 30,000 rounds a day in Grozny. That's a round every 30 seconds. You and I both know he doesn't have the ammo to even do that, even though this would require more than that. In like the Battle of Raqqa, the commanders on the ground were asking for a round every minute in front of them as they moved forward. And that's why the U.S. Marines fired more rounds in Raqqa than they did in most of Vietnam. He doesn't have what he needs, Pete, to do what he needs. Now it doesn't mean he could. So I think he needs to either penetrate it or he needs to infiltrate it. Infiltrate is scary and dangerous at this moment. Could he bring in, like a battalion of Wagner Group, former Spetsnaz, and figure a way to secretly get in, supported by fires, supported by deception? Maybe. But again, he gave him so much time. Every day is more time they prepared. And I'm just a guy who's seen a couple things. So I'm putting out some tweets. I'm like giving feedback. I'm like, okay, look, I like what you're doing here with this block of the road. But you can't stop there. Like you gotta form literally the 300s mountain wall at the hot gates down every block.
it's not as easy as folks want it to be. I mean, just if you're shooting around every 30 seconds, shooting around every minute, that means that 1 in, say, 2,000 rounds, someone's losing a finger, without a doubt. Someone is going to be absolutely incapacitated by something. I mean, these things are going to happen. You're going to destroy a weapon because Joe is dumb, even if he's, even if he's a Russian version of Joe. They're going to do something, and then that gun is gone. And then, by the way, it's a spoken hub fight. Yes, they're sieging and they're trying to encircle, but they don't hold all that land. Okay. They don't hold it all, right? And so,
I mean, when you got to look to your back, don't even get me started.
Yeah, and you're hungry and you're freezing, cold, and you're covered in mud.
Yeah,
whoo!
So I don't want to say it's not possible. I don't see how it's possible for what Russia's bringing. Even if he floods Syrian fighters and Wagner Group contractors and all this in, I don't see him taking Kyiv personally.
Yeah. Well, and that assumes that Wagner Group wants to play with them. What if a better deal comes?
Right.
Hey,
I mean, there's, just imagine all the stuff that's going on that we don't know about, right?
Oh yeah.
On both sides.
There's no air superiority. There's no air dominance here, right? And so, look, the Western world can up the ante at any time and start Marshall planning ahead of time and just start airdropping stuff.
Yeah, you and I are both in the military, so I'm really interested. Hey, I don't have a dog in this fight on what we learn from this, right?
Yeah.
So they're already starting to talk about that, right? I'm trying to actively help. I am.
Yeah.
So I've been on this pedestal for a while, right? Saying, hey, this urban thing is important. Hey, U.S. military is really an offensive centric force. You know this. Like we train to go fight somewhere else offensively. Like I'm moving to the objective and I'm going to attack it. This battle's like, hey, don't forget the defense is the strongest form of war.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. You still need to be prepared to defend.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just hold a bunker. I mean, the Russians or the Ukrainians are fighting a defense across their entire country in some way or shape.
And let me just say this out loud too. The war has reached the point where the military and look, there's all kinds of different ways to deliver this with drones, but you don't have to airdrop supplies out of a C-130 or a C-17. You can literally hang a pallet off of a drone and drop it into a zone. And then who does that drone belong to? I don't know. Wasn't us. And there's enough plausible deniability that Russia can go crazy trying to figure out who sent this pallet of 9mm rounds or whatever it is. But I mean, war has changed, and sitting in a circle around a city isn't a guarantee of anything anymore. It's going to be hard to starve out Kiev if Kiev doesn't want to be starved out, because who is it? Is it Estonia that's provisioning this? And buying drones that are.
There's really no way to even if you wanted to, even when we've tried in modern history, like the siege of Sarajevo, that. It wasn't possible. There was still the Freedom Tunnel. There's still ways to get things in.
So many ways. Yeah.
Even in Mariupol, there's already black markets on food and stuff happening because this is human nature.
And holding is hard. Even if you hold it, it takes a lot of resources to hold it.
Yeah. I will say thing about the drones, Pete. I went to Nagorno-Karabakh and went in there by myself as an academic and got taken all the way into like minefields and stuff. I didn't like it. There sometimes we got the wrong lessons, right? Look, Russia's teaching us, and everybody will do this, right? Whatever field they study, whether it's artificial intelligence or whatever it is, they're going to cherry pick the data they want.
Yeah.
So Azerbaijan kicked Armenia's butt in the second Nagorno-Karabakh because Armenia didn't have a modern air defense network. Yeah. Russia is getting their butt kicked by everything, really. I mean, you name it, they're getting their butt kicked because they didn't have a standard equipment for any of this stuff, to include localized air defense. Like, there's no EW. I mean, we've seen a couple of vehicles if you do open source intelligence, but they're getting hit by civilian drones because they don't have what we've learned like since 2014 on. Hey, you got to have these counter drones technologies. You got to have an EW suite. Like all this stuff. We know that today. Yeah. So when we come to that's why I think, like, again, they've lost their status as who we're imagining the big fight with. It's no longer them, because we'd mop them up on any battlefield at this point.
And by the way, you can have an EW, like an electronic warfare for the audience. You can have an electronic warfare shield to stop drones unless they fly over it and fly in at 40,000 feet. Yeah. And they just start dropping pallets. I mean, we got provisioned in
hypersonics and stuff. So
I mean, that is not super high end technology now at this point. Like it is consumable. You go to whoever, General Dynamics, whoever sells those things, and just huck it up there at 40,000 feet. Yeah, you're going to lose some amount of pallets. Yeah. Some of them are going to burn in. That's always true. However, you only need a few of them to get down to start making a difference where supplies. And again, who are you going to get mad at? Like you're going to radar track them and spend your time doing that. Great. Distract Russia all you want, because they're losing. Russia can't expand this fight, man. I don't think they can go to Moldova or, pop into Poland. I mean, I don't think that they can barely do what they're doing now. I don't know that I hate to say that they can't do this, but I don't know that they can do anything more than what they've bit off. And they've already bit off more than they can chew from all the things we've seen.
Yeah. And I don't know what what is the cost they're willing to pay. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
We're going to find out real quick what the price they're willing to pay to do this. How much does it matter to Putin?
Yeah. We decided to do this show just a couple of days ago. I knew you were doing a book tour, so I didn't want to bug you when you're in the middle of it, but then you got me some time, so I wanted to take it. So I've not had a time to read your book, but I see some chapters here, and I see chapter 11 is a winning team. And I got to know what John Spencer thinks a winning team is.
So that was at the point basically where I joined a team that was failing on every metric. And then we slowly built up the metrics. You had to, so in that situation, we were practicing how to do raids with a group that we were just getting the right leaders, taking out the bad leaders, because there are bad soldiers and bad influences. You have informal leaders and formal leaders. And we're in a slow process of weeding those out. Sometimes you just got to get rid of people. And then in real missions on the fly, trying to build what right looks like and learn. Because it's a really good, at that time, platoon leader, platoon sergeant, they started to actually get some small wins. And that stuff compounded to where they felt good about themselves. And that was the winning team, because their self-esteem as a group was forming. Because if you just kick a dog when he's down, there's something called learned helplessness. And that's talked about in this chapter. And where I actually shield them from a couple hits that would have come in a moment when I thought they needed more wins just to form as a group. And then once they did, and they got a major win in that chapter, caught HVT number 2 in the division.
Oh, wow.
And that was huge to them. And then all of a sudden they're the highest performing platoon in a brigade because they'd gotten some wins and now we're a high performing team.
One of the key words in your title of your book is leadership. Everybody talks about leadership. And I'll be unfair to Jocko. A part of Jocko's thing with leadership is ownership of things and working harder than the next guy, right? And I'm not, Jocko's great, no problem. But people say leadership and they just say it. Give me an idea, how do you create leadership? And the other thing too about the military is you lead. I mean, I learned to lead within the organization because I was never the commander, right? But still a leader, still, without bragging, John, my ability was to take a brigade and completely reorient them towards where they needed to go. So they stopped getting their ass kicked and the thing that they thought they were going to do. You're not going to push the Taliban south to Pakistan and encircle them and destroy them. It's not going to happen, right? And so I was able to lead this brigade, turn them 90, turn them 180 degrees and get them to go in a better direction. Did we win? Nope, sure didn't win. But that's leading, and I wasn't in charge of anybody, right? I just was providing the information that allowed them to be a better unit. So talk about leadership and what you've learned over decades of learning about this stuff.
Yeah. So sometimes I think the Army actually does get it right with all their sayings. And I'm going to, even though if you would ask me that question 5 years ago and I heard somebody giving this answer, I'd be like, what a jerk.
Yeah.
One, I think leadership is is a huge part of leading by example.
Right.
They're always watching you. Really, they are. And like literally especially in the officers, but also with the NCOs, we say that it's important to lead by example, but in war, which is what my book's about, is literally when all the stuff we talk about gets put to the test. One wrong move ruins your integrity. You can never get it back. And that destroys leadership. Each leader is the moral compass of that group, whether it's a squad or if it's a battalion. So I think there's this thing in the Army called 3 C's, and I think I don't live by them, but I think the Army got it right in explaining leadership, that it's about the person's character, the person's competence. So for me, from the time I was a young private until I was a senior leader, the leaders I respected the most were the ones that could do their job the best. Mm. I didn't really want a friend. I didn't want to be honest, I didn't want somebody to show me that they loved me. I followed hard-ass men who were extremely competent. And you know that Jocko, that's part of Jocko's, he breathes confidence.
Yeah, he does.
And some of that is presence. So the competence part is huge. And the last one is commitment. And there are all kinds of moments, and I give a couple in my book where there's a moment where your team knows that you're being tested, and it's real. Again, they're watching whether you're committed to them in the organization. There are tests of that a lot. And if you don't have all these 3 things, a character, competence in what your job is, and you don't have to know it all, that you learn. I made mistakes. My men knew it. And that's, but the fact that you're trying to learn and you're competent in the basics, I'm a huge believer in that. And then that showing loyalty and commitment to your men. As I grew up, all those things were always in the people that I respected as leaders. Of course, the Army gives you great examples of that is not right. Okay. That person's still in the Army. That is right. I want to be like that. So be like Mike.
I love one of the, just want to echo your point about confidence, character, these things. Well, one of the best commanders I ever worked with talked about his role as a commander in training. And yes, I know I've been through NTC 25 times or however many times it is. My job is to play the role of commander here. I don't have to solve all the problems because I know what the test is. I need you, E7. I need you, E4. I need you guys to learn that guy has a suicide vest, whatever. I can't. So I'm going to play the role of standard 1 each battalion commander. And I'll take the ass chewing from above for not getting these things right. But I need you guys to go through this training more than I do. I've been through it. And that takes guts to do that. And character to allow your guys to learn these lessons and have enough, and all commanders need this, but have enough ass to chew on so that they can go out and protect their guys and let their guys make the mistakes they've got to make to learn.
Yeah. No, one, I think what we're seeing in the Ukraine, to circle back, is literally an example of the lack of training.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's lots of aspects of this large-scale invasion that they weren't trained, because that would expose all your weaknesses. I hated going to NTC and JRTC. I honestly did. It was literally scary because you're being judged. I mean, it's not natural. I've been there now a lot more. It is what we call the Super Bowl. You know what happens there? Very large. Sometimes you may be like the individual guy, like, this just sucks. I don't understand this. But guess what's being exercise, logistics, what's being, some of this bigger level stuff. That's where the only places we can do it is in our Super Bowls. And guess what? Russia's showing they didn't do that beforehand. I mean, you would get your tires are bad, your railheads don't work. You would get all these things out of that.
Yeah. You will at 6:05 a.m. jump out of your vehicle and be following the leads. And you go around and you have a vehicle that was a little happier, because you and I both know the minute you go off that road and go through that field, vehicles are breaking, by the moment. And you're right. You got to go out and you got to go fight it out to figure out how to do it. Man, I don't want to take any more time. It's Friday, and I know how busy you are, and I hope the book just goes gangbusters. Everybody should get it. It's called Connected Soldiers. You can hear the expertise from John. I mean, just trust me on this. It's buy the book. Buy the book. There's the link here, right here. I'll show you on the screen. It'll be in the show notes. Thank you so much. Anything in closing for me or for the audience?
No, thanks a lot. So something this book is really me putting my heart online, and what I'm telling people now is stay connected to what's important to you.